Is the mic on?
Yo. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty exhausted because I just wrapped up an 8-hour shift, but that doesn't matter. I'm here to talk to y'all about the Batman because, as you expected, it sucks. I'm joking, it's amazing. It's like probably one of my favorite Batman movies of all time. Might even top The Dark Knight. Okay, I'm speaking too soon. I gotta watch it again. I am crazy about this movie. I wasn't like jumping out of my seat after I saw it. I had to really process it because it's a lot to take in. It's a 3-hour movie. You go on a whole journey with this character, but I was really digging it. I enjoyed it so much. Before I get into this review, be sure to subscribe, like this video, all that typical YouTube stuff. From the beginning of this movie, there's a very distinct theme, and I enjoyed that, and I like the eeriness of the opening of this movie. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but just go watch it. You'll be like, oh wow, there's some horror elements to this. It's really interesting how they kind of incorporate that into a superhero movie without really making it a horror movie. You don't see a whole lot of that throughout the entire movie, but I really enjoyed it, and I love the sort of fear element that you get from Batman whenever it comes to criminals. Like, people are deadly afraid of this dude. I gotta like refrain from comparing this to the Christopher Nolan trilogy because those are completely different from this. This actually feels like a comic book movie, whereas those felt like Christopher Nolan movies. I mean, there's comic book elements in those, but when you watch this, you still get a comic book Batman feel, but it still feels grounded at the same time. I think Matt Reeves put in like a good mixture of that, so I really think you're gonna be happy with what you see. The world building in this movie is incredible. To me, this is the first movie, I mean, I guess maybe besides like the 80s movies, where Gotham feels like a real place. It doesn't feel like Chicago like it did in the Dark Knight trilogy. This feels like Gotham City. It's like run down. Everything just looks gross. It's not a place you want to be in, that's for sure. And I love this whole like feeling the whole city has. You really feel immersed in this movie, and I'm so happy it's 3 hours because it's a journey. That's the way I see it. This whole movie is one long journey, and I never got tired of it. And I think the 3-hour runtime works for a detective story because there's so much to unravel and there's so many moving pieces and everything kind of connects to each other and it never really gets lost. The story doesn't really go in a separate path. You don't really feel like you're watching multiple storylines. Everything connects. So I think the way this movie was written, it was done very well. I think some movies kind of overdo it with their runtime. I actually really like the runtime of this movie. It worked for me. I didn't really think Endgame needed to be 3 hours, but this movie worked as a 3-hour movie. I never got bored. I never got tired of it. I really enjoyed it. I can't stress that enough. I love this whole detective noir style that this movie has. I love this detective version of Batman. He seems incredibly intelligent. We don't really get the same sort of origin story that we get from, like, say, Batman Begins. Here I am comparing it to the Nolan trilogy again, but whatever. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen like an origin story for this character to see like where he came from and like where he got trained, but we don't really need that. We know enough about Batman. It was just great to see how intelligent he was as a detective and how he was able to unravel things. You kind of just see like how messed up he is. I think this is like the most devoted Batman, where he just never stops being Batman. You see a lot of Batman in this movie, barely any Bruce Wayne. I mean, he's in some scenes, but for the most part you just see Robert Pattinson as Batman, and he really embraced this role, so I was totally on board for that. You're gonna get a great character study for Batman. Paul Dano as Riddler was absolutely amazing. He did a great job, and I just got chills whenever he showed up on screen. Every single time the Riddler was in the movie, I got so excited. There's a lot of Joker parallels, but it's not really in your face. It doesn't really feel like a ripoff of Joker. The Riddler is his own character. Colin Farrell as Penguin, he was amazing. You honestly forget it's Colin Farrell playing that character. He really nails that role, and I can't wait to see more of him in that role. Even if they didn't change his appearance at all, I still think I would forget it's Colin Farrell because of how well he played that character. I also really like Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. I think she might be my favorite Catwoman, to be honest. I mean, that's really all I have to say about it. I like the chemistry that her and Robert Pattinson had in the movie. So when it comes to the score, and I think the score is really important for a Batman movie because it's this whole dark, edgy thing, I really liked it. I don't think it's my favorite. With action movies, there's points where the score kind of starts to sound like something out of every action movie. Like a lot of action movies have similar scores nowadays. Of course, like the main theme of the Batman is amazing and I love it, but then there's also moments like in action sequences where you kind of like hear the same sort of like score. So again, it's not my favorite. It's not the Hans Zimmer version. I can't keep comparing this to the Dark Knight trilogy. I just watched the entire thing before going to see the Batman, but I can't help it. If I had to give another small nitpick, there's like one scene near the end, I think one earlier in the movie, that just felt kind of cheesy, and I think that was kind of like the comic book approach, and it was fine. It didn't ruin the movie, but it just kind of felt out of place. You might understand what I'm talking about when you see the movie. I don't want to say anything, but there's just a couple scenes that felt a little cheesy. So yeah, the 3-hour runtime works. You just have to have patience. Make sure you take a piss before you go see this movie, or just piss in the theater. It doesn't matter. I think you'll really like it. I'm happy to see a movie actually pull off a 3-hour storyline. I mean, Lord of the Rings did it, but that's Lord of the Rings. That's a different story. This is a comic book movie that actually managed to pull it off. So props to Matt Reeves, props to Robert Pattinson, who at the moment, he might be my favorite live action Batman. I may be speaking too soon, but I gotta watch the movie again. Christian Bale wasn't exactly my favorite Batman, even though I love those movies. I think if you're a Batman fan, I think you'll really enjoy Robert Pattinson's take on this movie, and I think you'll enjoy the way that Matt Reeves directed it. So I'd be perfectly fine with future installments of this franchise being 3 hours long because this movie managed to pull it off, and I'm sure the other movies could, so I'm really excited for more Batman movies. So if I had to rate the Batman, I think I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10. And that might change after I see it again. It could lower, could go higher, but after my initial viewing, I think I'd have to give it a 9.5 out of 10. I love this movie. I am so tired. So, yeah. Bye.